All right, we're going to get started again. We have still a lot of material to cover. So in this cloud-first, mobile-first world that we are working in, the rules are changing. There's a lot of nuances around licensing, around benefits, and around the technology. I think in my presentation I probably shared with you even a number of products and technologies you may not have been aware of. Licensing those technologies effectively, cost effectively, getting the right stuff at a good price and then maximizing the value you get out of your investment is really critical these days. And most of you did say you have an enterprise agreement. Working with a company that really understands licensing, the programs, the nuances, the benefits, is really important, because at the end of the day, whoever you're working with is paid the same amount of money by Microsoft, whether they do a great job for you in helping you to understand, these programs and act as an advisor, or a terrible job. So the decision on working with an organization around licensing really should be around the value add and the value that the individual reps who work with you and the expertise they bring to the table offer. We've had great experience working with SoftwareOne over probably about 10 years now in New York Metro, and more now up as we do more work in New England. And they've always, as an organization, had a great team of subject matter experts, sort of high knowledge individuals that really are able to act as a trusted advisor with their customers. So Bill from SoftwareOne is going to share some insights around how to take advantage of the licensing programs, what you need to know around Windows licensing in this changed world.
Thank you. So my name is Bill Trump. I'm what's defined as a software portfolio advisor. Basically what my role is within SoftwareOne, whenever you guys go through any of the licensing stuff and you sit there and look at, and hopefully it's not bugged in here with Microsoft, some of the ridiculousness of some of Microsoft's licensing rules and what you're allowed to do and not, and you sit there and go, who the hell has time to understand all this stuff? I apparently have time, because that's what we do. Where we differentiate ourselves from the other LSPs is we do not sell hardware, we do not sell consulting services, we rely on QTS to do what they do well. Ours is entirely on license maximization in terms of what you own, make sure you know what you own, that you're compliant, and that you have a roadmap moving forward. Okay, so that's kind of where we separate ourselves out. And again, all I do is software licensing. Okay. So basically what we're going to cover here, we're just going to quickly run through some of the Windows 10 additions. We're going to cover what was meant from a free, where Microsoft told everyone that you get Windows 10 free. We'll cover what Microsoft is defining as Windows as a service. We will go through specifically the different Windows 10 volume license offers, and then we're going to go in depth into the Enterprise Edition with SA. Software assurance. One key thing I'll note now is when we talk software assurance, if you traditionally looked at software assurance as my ability to go from 7 to 10 and that's all that was in there, that's really not the case anymore. That's from a value perspective, that's considered anywhere from 25 to like 45%. You obviously put your number depending on what you're looking to do, but the vast majority of the value that you derive from SA actually comes from technical use benefits, not just the ability to go from 7 to 10. Okay. So when we take a look, there's 4 different main desktop editions. The Windows 10 at home, that's your consumer. Where this will impact you as a business is if you do a bring your own device strategy. Your traditional ways of getting that are OEM or retail. The Windows 10 Pro, that's traditionally in the small, lower to mid-sized businesses. Your ways of getting that, again, OEM, although there is volume licensing on that with retail, and obviously I won't read through the slide, but you go through as you work your way down. Up top, you do not have your overall management, so you could not use home in a business setting just because of the fact that the license A doesn't allow you to do so, but B, you also have limitations in terms of what you're able to do for device management and controls and how you manage it. Okay, Windows 10 Enterprise, that's where we get into the mid-size and larger. You get your advanced security, you get your extensive device support, and we'll go through what that means in more detail. That also is where you start to get flexibility in terms of actually how you deploy the OS. Okay, that is only available via volume licensing, and if you happen to be in the education space, there is Windows 10 for education. Is anybody in the education space? Okay, so part of what I will cover, if you have questions afterwards specific to some of the education stuff, I don't have as much on the slides, but I can provide additional detail if there's something you feel I don't address. Okay. Okay. And then mobile editions, the traditional mobile edition, this is not phone. This is where if I'm going to have a point of sale tablet or I have specific devices that are coming down and I'm utilizing them on stock floor, I'm scanning, etc. They're traditionally a lockdown device. This is not phone, okay, or Surface, because Surface is the full version. And in terms of where you would have had the traditional RT on the original Surfaces, this also is not that, okay? So the current upgrade plan. From a consumer perspective, if I have Windows 8, 8.1, or one of the previous Windows 7 version, I can upgrade to Windows 10 Home at no charge, okay? If from a commercial perspective, I have Windows 8, Windows 7 Professional, I can go to Windows 10 Professional, and again, that is included. So I have 1 year in which to do this. I don't know if any of you have done this as of yet, but basically it's a go through. There should be on your taskbar on the bottom, there's a little upgrade to Windows. You go through, you register the machine. It lets you know anywhere from 20 minutes to a couple hours in terms of what you have to do from a consumer perspective to upgrade it. Business, you do have a little more control over how you're doing it. You can roll that out as part of your corporate image, but again, that is covered as part of the free upgrade. If you want any of the additional services or upgrades beyond that, then you start getting into adding the upgrade license or software assurance, which gets you into the charge, okay? This is also updated, especially in the commercial space, but the consumer as well. You will do this via the Windows Update, okay? It is part of that service. So if you as a corporation do not have Windows Update on there, you happen to do it via WSUS or something like that, you actually are going to be limited in terms of what you're able to do from the upgrade. Okay. Any questions on that? Everybody good? Okay. So with Windows 10, Microsoft has really come out with what they're now defining as Windows as a service. This is incorporated within the different versions of the licenses, but basically what they're taking is where you would have just had Windows Update or WSUS or some sort of third-party update tool. They're now putting those pieces and defining them from a categorization standpoint, and what you're able to do comes down to what license you have from an entitlement perspective, okay? So consumer devices, traditionally you would have off of the Windows Update, and this is really comes on, it's directed from Microsoft as you traditionally would have had off of the Windows Update. But this is really where Microsoft's pushing it down as they have the updates, and you as a consumer are deciding whether to allow that to run or not, okay? Where this becomes a little bit of an issue is in terms of making sure you have a management strategy is where you take a look at the BYOD devices, making sure that how are you going to manage that from a corporation in terms of do you have policies and procedures in terms of what a BYOD device needs to have, and that's where you would get more into, are you utilizing some of the System Center components or other tools to make sure that as a BYOD device comes in that it's meeting those standards. But that's not actually something you would push down from a management layer. It's again a verification process for the end user consumer. It would still be a Windows Update for their individual device. Okay. There's two flavors of current branch, and this actually falls under what they now call as current branch as well. Current branch is basically Microsoft now allows you, as they had previously, via the Windows Update or as a corporation to say, okay, what features do we want? When are we comfortable having them rolled out? Do we want it to have been in the marketplace for a while, and you control in terms of when those devices come out. And again, that's going to be off of the Windows Update or WSUS. The real kind of special piece that they've added now is called the long-term service branch. Okay, now this is a 10-year service where if you have specific applications where aside from security, you need it flat out to remain constant without change. You've got point of sale applications, hospitals, air traffic controller, part of what they utilize it. Basically, if you have long-term customization of your device for that application that you cannot have anything other than security patches come out, Microsoft now allows you the flexibility to do that via the long-term service branch. Okay? And we'll get into a little more detail in terms of how these come on in this slide here. Okay? So in terms of how will I actually deliver the updates, the Windows 10 Home, Windows Update, again, this is for more your consumer or within your bring your own device. Windows 10, I'll have my current branch, which again is the traditional Windows Update, current branch for business, and I can do that via WSUS as well as the Windows Update for business. Windows 10, same allowances, and then Windows Education, same as the Windows 10 Enterprise. Okay, but these are basically your delivery mechanisms. Within here, there's obviously, and we'll get to this in the next couple slides, where when we take a look at the enterprise especially, there's specific licensing that you need to have those services. So especially around the long-term servicing branch, it is an ongoing software assurance functionality. It is not something where it's a single point in time. You need to maintain your SA on it. So when we take a look at the options from a volume purchasing program, you have Pro, you have Enterprise, but then within Enterprise you have software assurance, and then there's also BDA. I'll get into the two of those and where they each fall. But the key take from this is actually you now have a per user as opposed to per device license option for Windows. Okay. This will have major, especially if you have enterprise agreements, this will have major impact in terms of how you license your applications, okay? Or, excuse me, how you license your devices and the amount of devices you have. So right now, if you have started to have a proliferation of devices where I have my PC, my tablet, I'm doing some sort of virtual desktop infrastructure, all of that, we will now be able to minimize some of the cost exposure, but really a lot of that is not just minimizing the cost, but it's also from a compliance perspective. And we'll get into some of that as we get into a little more detail on those. But again, those are falling under from software assurance. Are there any questions? I know I'm kind of going quickly here. 20 minutes. Okay. So when we get into software assurance on Windows desktop. So basically, I have a PC that I buy that comes OEM'd with my Windows desktop operating system on it. Okay. Anything I do within an upgrade license, which is how I would buy Windows Pro, or Windows 10 Enterprise, which would be a license plus software assurance. Anything I do on that requires an underlying operating system on the primary device. Okay. So if I decided I was going to build my own PCs, I still actually have to go out and buy an operating system to then qualify for these additional licenses. If I do not have that underlying operating system, I cannot buy the upgrade for Pro, and I cannot go straight to software assurance with this. Okay. It's just flat out. I had a credit union once that tried to build their own machines, and it was ridiculous to a certain degree because they had to actually reach out to an OEM manufacturer, buy the OS to then qualify for the other pieces. Okay. And FYI, I'm not Microsoft. I don't make their rules. I'm just sharing with you what they are. Okay. So as I said earlier, when we take a look at software assurance, where we're looking at software assurance is not just the ability to go from 7 to 10, 8 to 10 or something like that. When you get into the enterprise version, there's all of this stuff that is put within the software assurance benefit. It is not part of the core license. So where you're taking a look at like the granular UX control and lockdown. These are all SA features, okay? The granular UX controls are, I have devices a lot of times, more tablets where I'm locking down, so it's a point of sale application. Or if I'm at the airport and I go to a kiosk and I just want to see the change my flight stuff. That is all what you would control with the UX control and lockdown, so somebody else can't get in and start manipulating the machine. It's called Credential Guard now. If you did any reading on it beforehand, it used to be called Pass the Hash Migration. So if you have like Kerberos hashtags or other things where you're trying to limit controls coming in, you have that tool. And this is all stuff that if you have more specific questions off of it, QTS can get granular on the actual functionality with this. Mostly I just want you to be aware that it's contained within the license, okay? The telemetry control, the device guard, these are all just, again, more security pieces. A lot of them will work in conjunction with System Center, and then also when we get to MDOT, direct access, which is the VPN tunneling automatically inherent within Windows. Another key one is the start screen control. So if you if you have those people who lose their minds every time they lose the start button and you want to control the images in terms of how they're coming down, you need to have SA for the enterprise version. Windows to Go, App Locker, and Branch Cache. MDOT. MDOT used to be a separate license. So I would buy Windows Enterprise or I could buy Windows Enterprise with MDOT. Okay. They did away with the 2 SKUs, and now if you buy software assurance, you're getting MDOT. Okay. So that's where you get your desktop virtualization, your application virtualization. The application virtualization is quite key, especially if you're going to an Office 365 strategy where within Office 365, as I download my copy of Office, I'm required to be on the most current version. If they come out with a new version, I'm required to go to that within a year. Okay. So from an Office perspective, I will always be current or close to current with Office. However, I may have specific Great Plains applications that require me to have Access 2007. And that, even if it's just 10 users, whatever that subset is within your accounts receivable or what have you, those people have to have Access 2007 on it. Well, how do you handle that? That's where the application virtualization comes in very key, because this plays in with what you have with Office 365 is it allows you to run Access encapsulated and not have it conflict with your Office 365 download. Okay? And again, there's more details on it. QTS can, if you need to get more granular on that, but that's where that tends to be a very large feature on it. The BitLocker administration, the group policy, and the diagnostics. Okay? That I've talked about as well, the long-term servicing branch. And then the other key things when you get down to this, to the far left here, this is where you get into the version rights. So my ability to go to 7 to 10, if they come out with 10.1, your ability to go to 10.1. Windows to Go. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Windows to Go is where I can actually have a USB as my Windows drive or my Windows boot. That actually, I've had several banks who do that because they actually give their tellers their USB, and it becomes their control point because they didn't have the admin controls from the directory policy. So the virtualization rights and then your hotfix. The other key thing is within the enterprise agreement structure, you do get your training vouchers. So with like New Horizons, you're able to utilize those towards training. And then you also have, within an EA, you'll traditionally have your deployment service days. So if technologies you want to keep looking at it, stuff that you can utilize to help buy down some of the costs of some of the planning service. Okay. So when we get into the traditional world that we've been coming from, Windows was a device-based license. So I had to have that qualifying underlying operating system. I had the local install rights for there. And then if I wanted those other functionality, I needed to get the enterprise license with the SA. thin client, I have no local install rights, but I do not need a qualified OS underneath. So if you have thin clients within your infrastructure, and this is all, it is not an either or situation. If you have 200 PCs but 200 thin clients, you'll have a hybrid between the two and you manage it accordingly. Okay. So when we get into, and this is kind of similar to what we had, but basically again, as we get into licensing now per user, in the same way Office 365 licenses you per user for Office, and I have the 5 PCs, the 5 tablets, the 5 phones, this now allows you to extend out to per user licensing for Windows. So the way it worked traditionally, has anybody ever heard of a companion subscription license? Okay. Does anybody have a tablet that they were running a virtual instance of Windows on while they had it separate from their primary device? Okay. So Microsoft had something that was called a companion subscription license. So I had my PC and I had Windows Enterprise on it, which gave me VDA rights as part of it. I'll cover a little bit more, but it gave me VDA rights so I could virtualize that operating system. The problem is I could only virtualize it to one device, and that device also needed to have an underlying OS, so I couldn't share it to a tablet or something else. I actually needed to buy an additional license, which was called the companion subscription license, that allowed me to pull the OS off of my primary device and virtualize it and access it on 4 additional devices. Okay, they've thankfully done away with that. And now I can just license it per user, and I can take my OS as long as I have a primary device with the qualifying underlying OS. I can then extend that through virtualization to multiple devices as long as I myself am utilizing it. So where we take a look at this is Windows itself, and this kind of reinforced what I just said. We have per device. Every single device required the OS. I could only do the local install on a single device. Anything from a virtual desktop was, again, for a single device. So everything I needed, even from an enterprise, I had to account for all those other devices. So where this would also have an impact is on an enterprise agreement. When you licensed Windows for your enterprise, you're required to account for all of your devices. So if someone had a tablet, you actually had to buy a license for that tablet. If someone brought in, and again, this is Microsoft rules, not mine, if I brought a tablet from home into the office, that needed to be accounted for from a licensing perspective because I was now on premise with the device. Okay, I could be across the street at Starbucks. I'm okay if I had SA. I bring that tablet on premise. At that point, I'm now out of compliance because of the fact that I'm on the corporate infrastructure. Okay. Again, it's hard to track. You weren't going to be hunted down by the audit police on it, but again, if you're doing a lot of things wrong and they're looking for reasons to hit you, it was just another gotcha where now, again, as you go to the user, now we don't care because you're licensed as a user. Okay. So, and I've already covered most of that. The only key thing is when we go to the per user, I still do have to have a qualifying OS on whatever those additional devices are. Okay. So I cannot have a virtual instance, or I cannot load my OS on a PC I built. Okay. And again, it's got to be pro. So I cannot bring in a device from home with Windows Home on it and do a local install of my corporate enterprise Windows. Okay. So we get to VDA. Okay. VDA is how we license a thin client. So as the example I was talking about earlier, we have 200 PCs, we have 200 thin clients. There is no underlying OS on a thin client. Okay. So I have to account for the entire OS as part of my virtual instance. Okay. So I would do that via VDA license. Now, just little off topic, but just to clarify, if you're doing this and you have RDS, VDA does not include RDS. If you're utilizing any sort of Citrix terminals, whatever it is, those are all separate licenses. VDA covers the OS and the virtualization of the OS only. Okay? So in the old way, if I had
Citrix world, if you're doing Zen desktop, you need VDA.
I still have to have VDA.
Zen app, you need RDS.
Correct. Citrix and VMware do not understand this. So I just say that from if you're doing this and you talk to them, they miss this an awful lot. I've seen it in a lot of compliance reviews where Citrix told them they were fine. They told them they were fine with the RDS and they were not. Because again, you have to look at this as the OS is an entity in and of itself. Okay. So the license model again was per device. So even if I had 50 people, but I had 200 thin clients, I had to license 200 thin clients. Okay. Now what we're able to do is I could just license 50 users, and I could go across to all 50 of those because I have the OS, and again, it's defined from the user. The other nice thing is I'm now allowed a local install of the OS. So in a traditional VDA world, I would not be allowed to have that, especially as you get into some point of sale or healthcare type applications, kiosk type stuff where sometimes you need the local install, but it's still a shared device, and I'm still doing it via virtualization for 90% of what's on there. There's just sometimes I structurally need something there. I'm able to do that, okay? And the VDI, again, is I can go to any device. I'm not limited to just like each individual thin client. Okay? So I apologize rushing through that a little bit. Are there any specific questions people have?
I think just hearing all that reinforces why you need somebody who knows the rules and can help you through that. So, Bill, thank you very much. And we'll be around at the end of the session to talk, and we'll also, assuming we can stay on track, have a Q&A panel at the very end.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So, Bill Masiola, we're up again. So, we're going to talk a little bit about deployment approaches now. And as we talk about that, I want to paint a picture of sort of the options that you have at your disposal. How many of you are familiar with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, or MDT? You guys have used it with us. You've used it. This is one of the best kept secrets that Microsoft has. This is an amazing set of free tools to do imaging for your Windows computers. We've had success with it with large enterprises as well as small businesses. They'll work with a 45, 50 person media firm, a web journalism firm, to standardize their Windows 7 deployment using these imaging tools. A lot of people don't know it exists, but it's a free download from the Microsoft website. And in fact, I think I could argue it's the best thing that came out of Windows Vista, because this was developed by Microsoft as part of the effort to drive Vista to market and make it easy for organizations to deploy Vista. That sounds a little strange in hindsight, but the tools were really good and they just kept evolving over time. So this is an asset that you have available to you, and if you see our brochure for our Quick Start for Windows 10 offering, most of the services in there revolve around building the image using the Deployment Toolkit. Although you can also use System Center Configuration Manager. And a couple of you said you were using SCCM today. What SCCM does that is really magical is It takes the imaging capabilities that are part of the deployment toolkit and integrates them with the ability to do patch management and software distribution. And you can tie them all together using a function called task sequences to create an automated or semi-automated build process. So I used the customer case study of this. We worked with a New York-based but global executive recruitment firm, Russell Reynolds Associates. They placed Mark Hurd at Hewlett-Packard. They have a lot of Fortune 500 clients that also do management consulting. They have 3 major data centers worldwide, about 1,600 users across about 50 branch offices. And we spent about 3 months, maybe 4 months with them planning and designing and then building and perfecting their gold image using SCCM, as well as making sure their apps were packaged and the patches were rolled up. And we also spawned that image over to their VDI environment with Citrix and Desktop. So single image, single point of management for physical and virtual desktops. We then rolled out to their Boston branch office on site and did some tuning and refined the image. We did one of their New York locations with them. And then in the course of about 3 months, they rolled out to 1,600 employees without visiting the branch offices. And we got this performance tuned to a point where, admittedly on Lenovo X1 Carbons with solid state drives, but 15 minutes to re-image a system with Windows 7. If the help desk gets a call from a user about a Windows problem and they think it's going to take more than 10 minutes to take the call, they just re-image the machine because they've got everything automated to a point where the re-imaging is just push a button. The data is all handled through folder redirection, so the data is all protected. So the machines really are, toasters. They really are just a appliance that's easily switched out. And so this is nirvana for them, and we're working with them now to plan the move to Windows 10. But from a help desk perspective, they've reduced their help desk calls, they've simplified their help desk calls, they've improved the user experience through the standardization. And this is what you can do with SCCM. It's really, really powerful stuff. And so what's right for you depends on the size of your business and also the capabilities of your IT organization. Someone like Russell Reynolds had, several people working with us. They contributed, they received the knowledge transfer, they internalized it. We have some customers where we outsource and we do some of the things for them. But at the end of the day, you can get some real rewards from automating your desktop build process if you put the right effort into engineering your desktop. We're talking about a transition that changes your desktop support and deployment strategy from kind of a brute force, type approach to more of a savvy technical approach that takes more upfront work, but then less ongoing effort that pays itself back as you achieve scale. Intune, I mentioned earlier, part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. How does that relate to this? Well, if you're a smaller organization, perhaps the combination of the deployment toolkit for imaging and using Intune for patch management, software distribution, and inventory might be less complex and more cost-effective. So for a smaller organization, maybe it's those two pieces working together where you don't want to license SCCM, although that can now be part of a cloud subscription. SoftwareOne can talk to you about the Enterprise Cloud Suite. Or where you don't want to manage something like SCCM in your environment. On the flip side, if you have SCCM, you can integrate Intune. You can leave it freestanding if you choose, but you can also integrate Intune so that you can do your mobile device management from within SCCM. And also management of off-network computers. If you have computers that seldom or never connect to your Active Directory, those can be managed through Intune, but using SCCM as the control panel. And one of the things we do with SCCM is we try to get as much as possible, I forget who said he hates this expression, I don't think he's in the room, a single pane of glass, that one place you go to for multiple management tasks. And we did a webinar a couple weeks ago, actually, with Jackie from Syrson as part of that, to talk about extending SCCM. I think you guys were on that. Into other areas. We've had a lot of success sort of getting more and more value out of the SCCM investment for our customers. You can do a lot of these same things with other tools. I'm not an Altiris or a Landesk guy. I can't speak to the hows on those things. We're a Microsoft shop. What I will say is the integration across the Microsoft tools and the capability for automation is what's really significant. So I wanted to kind of paint the picture on the deployment tool set, and we'll talk at the very end about calls to action and offers. But if you're not using MDT and you want to, our Quick Start package is a great way to get started quickly. And if you're not using SCCM and you want to, we also have a Quick Start for SCCM. Let's talk about rolling out the image, whichever tool you use.
So one of the things, when Neil was talking about Russell Reynolds, one of the things that was important to understand is that they standardized their processes and they standardized their set of tools. And that's really important. Before we start deploying, we want to make sure we plan and we standardize on our processes and tools. The same config manager environment we set up for them for Windows 7, they used again to deploy Windows 8.1, and we're going to use again for Windows 10. There are some underlying components that we're going to upgrade, but same process, same set of tools. When we talk about deployment, in the past what we've always discussed is out of 4 scenarios, new computer, refresh, replace, and upgrade, we've used 3. A new computer, essentially what we need to do is lay an operating system down onto a hardware platform without concern for user state, because there's no user, it's new. A refresh scenario essentially means that I'm going to put a new operating system onto an existing computer, and I need to make sure that I preserve the user state, which is, user content, user favorites and IE, and the general look and feel that the user has customized. Same hardware, new operating system, I need to lay down a new operating system preserving the user state. When I talk about replace, I'm essentially capturing that user state and putting it onto a new hardware and operating system platform. We said we will never do upgrade because we're going to carry too much junk over from the old environment to the new in upgrading an environment, and that was really particular for Windows XP to Windows 7 environments. With Windows 10, however, we're now introducing the upgrade process, the upgrade task sequence in both MDT and Configuration Manager as a supported and recommended approach. And this is essentially, though, from Windows 7, Windows 8.1 to Windows 10. We can't do Windows XP to Windows 10 as an upgrade. But if we've established that we're on Windows 7 SP1, Windows 8.1 update, we can do an upgrade scenario to get to Windows 10. What that means is we're no longer doing a wipe and load. We're essentially putting down the new operating system, preserving registry, preserving application settings, and the user state. So we don't have to take that user state and put it somewhere, and we're preserving the application state, if you will. The fundamental component of all of the deployment tools is a Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit, and with each new operating system, there's a new WADK. That's the file-based imaging tool that we've used now since Vista, the ImageX and DISM for servicing those images. If you're using something like Ghost, that is hardware specific. You usually are tied to the sector size of the drive. The hard drive controller can impact the imaging, the ability to redeploy that image onto new platforms. When we use file-based imaging, that's part of WADK, we're making it HAL and hardware independent. We don't worry anymore about what the targeted hardware platform is. We have a file-based image, a .wim, that is serviceable offline as well using tools. So when I have the WADK, that's all command line driven. So what we do then is put the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit on top of that. We have a workbench with that allows us to graphically interact with the operating system. We can also put in applications, we can put in drivers, we can put in packages for updates. Same thing with System Center Configuration Manager. WADK is a prerequisite for Configuration Manager, and when we integrate WADK and MDT into Configuration Manager, we have what's called the zero-touch deployment. managed systems, I can deploy the operating system to centrally without having to touch the machine. When I look at MDT standalone, that's what's called light touch. Somebody has to initiate the process. Also built within the new tool set, though, is the Windows Imaging and Configuration Designer. So we've always talked about wiping and loading. We now have a way to upgrade an operating system, and we also have the ability to provision, not re-image. So with the provisioning tool, we no longer have to wipe and load a new operating system. We have this ability to deploy a package to tweak a pre-existing operating system. If I go into Best Buy and I pull a machine and I buy that machine and it comes with like Windows Pro on it, but my organization runs enterprise with a few specific applications, I can use this tool now to create packages and send those packages to the user of that machine, and I can do things like change them from Pro to Enterprise and deliver applications. I can also deliver those packages with USB devices, email, MDT, or SCCM. So it's no longer just about imaging. I now have this provisioning aspect built within it. Windows 10 no longer makes any distinction between on-premise and off-premise or mobile devices. Essentially, a device is a device is a device. Whether it's a cell phone, laptop, desktop, any kind of two-in-one tablet, Windows 10 has mobile device management controls built into the operating system. So you're no longer worried about what type of platform it is and can I manage it. Mobile device management's already built in. So the question is, in an enterprise, you of course want to have a consistent deployment and a consistent user experience. So what we do is we have the ability now through group policy. We've got a new operating system, so there's no more group policy settings. There is a spreadsheet for those settings. But we want to do things like consistently set up the start menu, Cortana, credential guard. You want to have a consistent look and feel for your users. Some organizations may choose they don't want Cortana enabled. They may want tiles turned off. That's up to you, but the ability to set all that through group policy is really what you're going to leverage so that you have a consistent user experience. So it's key to remember the key concepts for deployment is we're still going to use Config Manager MDT for our deployment, but we now have the option of doing an upgrade from Windows 7 or Windows 8.1, and we now have the provisioning tools as well, so we don't have to just do wipe and load.
Okay.
Questions?
A question about group policy on Windows 10. How is it deployed through the domain controller? Is it domain controller specific, or is it retroactive to 2008 and above, or are there any specifics about that?
The thing is, so you don't have to be at any specific level of Active Directory. They'll deploy, but to manage them, you have to load the templates for Windows 10 group policy. And when Windows Server 2016 comes out, that will have if you basically bring your domain to 2016 level, it should have those templates built in. Right now, you can download the templates and integrate those into Active Directory. Yeah.
So so images. So we have SCCM,
yep.
And we're looking at especially with the integration and the consistency between the OSs. Is there a way to create images like a universal image that can be dropped across platforms, tablets?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the fundamental notion behind file-based imaging, is that you're no longer tying that image to a specific set of hardware. So because either through MDT or in Config Manager, I have a driver catalog, I'm doing dynamic driver injection during the task sequence. So MDT, Config Manager, they both have a task sequence engine. And it's the same in both platforms. That is the component that walks through the steps of the task sequence, which includes driver injection. So dynamic driver injection means that my image is HAL and hardware independent.
Okay, so follow up to that. What percentage of companies are deploying images, custom internal images to phones and tablets, in your experience? Or is it still just sort of a BYOD with those, and they're continuing to use desktops and laptops for print?
It would be the mobile devices are so varied that essentially it is becoming more of a BYOD, but we're using things like Intune to do mobile device management and setting policy on them, so we're restricting them from doing specific things.
Okay. But,
You know.
but creating images, companies creating images for mobile devices is just not anything that's taking off.
Well, it's one of those things where if you were running Windows phones, you could,
Right. Well, yeah.
you know,
It's
but
still very new
yeah.
in terms of the operating system. So I think we've absolutely seen companies taking Windows image, Windows 8 image, Windows 10 image, I think you've done some work, and say adding Surface to it, adding other device types. So we've definitely seen the bleed over from laptop, desktop, tablet. We just haven't really seen it move to phone yet.
And the tough part about phones is that they're provider specific as well. It's not like I get an Android device or a Microsoft device from Verizon and they haven't touched it. They've done their own customization, and that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. Yeah. Management's a different story. So when you look at an Apple phone, you look at a Windows phone, mobile device management's built into the platform. Android, not so much. It depends on the hardware manufacturer. Samsung specifically, like when we look at Intune, Samsung specifically has a lot more capability because they have built-in mobile device management. So, good. Thank you.
All right. So our last module before we sort of wrap up with call to action and the Q&A is Paul from Citrix is going to be talking about how Citrix's role has evolved with Windows 10 and with changes Microsoft has made. And QTS has been a Citrix partner going back to about '94, so that's the WinFrame days. It's been quite a while, and we sort of tracked the relationship between Citrix and Microsoft. And it's always been a very complementary relationship where Citrix has always taken where Microsoft is and extended it and added value. So I don't think anything's changed with that. And Paul's going to talk a little bit about where Citrix is and is going as it relates to the Microsoft Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you. First of all, any veterans in the room? Nobody? All right. Well, if you see one, tomorrow's Veterans Day. And if you see a Marine today, tell them happy birthday. Just to get that out of the way. I am not Todd Smith. Todd Smith, if you knew him, is actually very funny because he's about 3.5 times the size I am. So I am. He was multi-booked today, so he let me come down here to speak. And for the record, I've been with Citrix now all of 3 months. So I was in your shoes just a very short time ago. I worked down at St. Francis, did the infrastructure of the hospital down the road here. So let me back up one. So basically, Windows 10 support migration and app delivery strategy. How are you going to get there? How are you going to get Windows 10 there? I mean, it's a big undertaking, as all these OSs have been over the years for you. Though this one, the upgrade process itself seems easier. You still have the application integration and how you have to deal with it. So in Todd's slide here, we have an agenda for yesterday, today, and the pragmatic migration strategy, how you're going to get there. So setting the stage a little bit for yesterday, maybe. You had a lot more hands-on with your PCs, right? You had to go touch a lot of them. You had to go make sure all the different PCs and the hardware stuff work together, and it was much more difficult than it has been in today's days. He called it a pragmatic luxury, which you spent more time and knew your devices a lot better than you did before. And we were just talking about BYOD and everything else. I mean, the devices out there vary a lot more than they ever did before. So you're not going to see your endpoints as well. You have application compatibility. You had to go through, you got to test every single application on all these different devices, and there's how many different flavors of devices and how many different versions of those applications you may be supporting. So I know in my prior lives, we had maybe 100+ applications, and you take that varied by how many different potential hardware mixes to throw into it. You're doing a lot of user acceptance testing, and you're doing it one by one, and it's painful, and it's install and test and repeat. So yesterday was a painful place to be. As you come in today, and you got more BYOD, and you got more different types of devices, you have the end users driving a lot of the the upgrade process. You have a lot of demands from the end users you may not have had before, and this is getting more and more so the case. They're bringing in technology that they expect to be able to use in IT at work than before. So there's a more intelligent user, and I use that in certain aspects of it. I know maybe in some instances not, but they expect more anyway. They're more demanding than they were before. So it's something to consider. And I kind of found this number interesting. 359 million upgrades in year one. That's the expectation for Windows 10. So you're going to see it out there quite a bit, and you're going to see a lot. I don't know if that number has changed or altered since then, but that's phenomenal. My father's been retired 20-something years and upgraded his PC without calling me, which I thought was awesome, actually. So as the enterprise, when you're dealing with this now, what you have to do, I mean, and the biggest thing, you need to maintain business continuity. You can't allow a major upgrade to impact business. I mean, that's probably what you deal with on a regular basis anyway, what you deal with all the time. So, and along with business continuity, I mean, you're supporting employees regardless. So, if they're demanding this new application and it has to be Windows 10, or you're not preparing for it, or if new Edge software comes out or Internet Explorer based, and you need to get up there, you need to address what's coming, and Windows 10 is here already. So as an enterprise, you need to be able to figure out how to support it and how to implement it. So, and with that, formulate app compatibility and compat plan. So, if you've been around IT long enough, you've done enough of these OS upgrades, you know there's Windows 10 may or may not work with the existing software you have from maybe the guy that runs out of his garage. We had a few of those even in a big corporation. Or just some companies are slow to adapt to the new technology. Some software companies are slow to adapt to the new Internet Explorers or the new Windows OSs or whatever it might be. So you need to create some sort of approach. You need some sort of game plan on how to get there to Windows 10. So just so happens we have 3 steps to Windows 10. It's funny how that works. So ensuring business continuity, and it's just a little bit more here about saying, what's the danger of losing productivity, the amount of service desk tickets and the training of the service desk technicians. All this costs money. All this adds up to some sort of cost. So it's just reiterating that and why you want to stay current and together. The other part you have here, more business continuity. What you could do to help do that. So if you're able to stand up corporate supported desktops, if you're able to get that ahead of time and present that only for testing, for users, for what it might be, you could also, in this case, standing up the corporate IT supported desktop, you have a Windows 10 image that's good to go. And one of the ways that Citrix is proposing you could do is you could install the receiver on it, on the new desktop. So this is out at the user. You could launch receiver. Receiver is just access to Windows, to Citrix products. And then from there, you could launch your Windows 7 desktop, the one that you've been using the whole time. It's now a virtual desktop. Or maybe you're going to go to the applications you need or whatever it might be. So it's a way to solve the problem now for the Windows 10 devices that are going to be rolling out there. So basically, loading, and I meant to ask this in the beginning, I apologize. Is anyone using Citrix now at their place? So so I find most people do know what it is. I don't know if everybody does or not. But we're talking about virtual application delivery and virtual desktop delivery. So in this case, it's basically saying take your Windows 10 device, load receiver, and run a virtual desktop delivered by Zen Desktop from Citrix or Zen Apps from Citrix. So it's a way to buy your time. You're not worried about the application integration on Windows 10 just now. So, and then the big part is here, okay, now that I can get my users on Windows 10 to keep working and not lose that business continuity, call in forensics. So now the biggest thing is the OS has changed, but it's more the applications that you have to support, right? If you have 100 applications you have to support, or 30, or whatever it might be, they need to be able to work. And in years past, with all the different hardware, with all the different OSs, all the different testing that you had to do, it took a very, very long time. So what we're looking at now in today's world, you know, go in there, if you take a forensic look at it and you got to test each one of the target OS's app delivery SQL, depending on testing and what you do about business continuity. This is what it's going to take to get there, kind of thing. So Citrix has a tool called AppDNA. And what AppDNA is going to do is it's going to look at, either you can look at your MSI, you can look at your EXEs, and it can see and do the testing and then come out and let you know how it's going to do. So it could take a look at each one of them. You see the red, green, ambers kind of thing. So green, you know right away, hey, this application is not going to have any problem going over to Windows 10. You can move that one over. Amber might say, well, you need to tweak this or you need to tweak that, and it's going to give you some suggestions on that. And red flat out says, yeah, this isn't going to work on Windows 10. So now you have a list of exactly what does work, what maybe with some tweaks will work, and what flat out won't work. And maybe those flat out won't works, I need to get a hold of the vendor that I buy that software from, and I need to, when's this version going to be supported, when's the next one, or how you going to do that. But what it allows you to do is start getting that plan. And instead of going into each application one by one, testing, breaking, fixing back and forth, you now have just by pointing this application at it, at those EXEs, you have a very detailed report on what is and what is not going to work.
How is this different from the application compatibility toolkit?
From Microsoft. I don't know enough about that one. I don't know if
I think that AppDNA is going to present a deeper level of information about app compatibility on different platforms. So for example, the app compatibility toolkit is going to look at an app and say, on Windows 7, on Windows 10, AppDNA is also going to say, on terminal services, in a VDI environment. And I think it's a bit more mature in terms of the ability to break apart apps, not just based on exe files and stuff. So you're getting, I think, a more actionable dashboard than ACT will give you.
This was used a lot it was introduced, it's only a couple of years ago, Citrix introduced it. They purchased a company and did what they did. But it was huge with the Windows 7 migration. That's really where this paid off. So, and again, you'll see it going forward more. It's a quite extensive, and detailed. So it'll get into the nitty.
And it actually was not an inexpensive product, but as a benefit in their partner program, we have the ability to use the tool on behalf of customers when we do planning engagements. So in terms of looking at Windows 10, this is part of what we can bring to the table as part of our quick design offering, which I'll tell you about as we wrap up.
If you get a bunch of greens or you go in there and you get that detailed report, it'll almost seem unfair in past deployments and what you had to go through.
Yeah.
So
you can always still do it to reminisce.
You can. You're right. You absolutely can if you like beating your head against that brick wall. Never migrate again. The theme to this slide is basically saying, look, if you virtualize your gold image desktops that you deploy out anyway already, and you have a Zen desktop that you can go to, or Zen apps, then you really don't have to worry about these migrations. You'll have time to work it out as you get to Windows 10. And you may still want those local applications on the desktop, but this will give you the time to get there. This will allow you to find different ways to do it. So never migrate again. I don't know if that's a little misleading, maybe a Ben Carson headline or whatever you want to call it, but that's its point is about once things are virtualized, you have your options. You can either use that fully or not. In a little bit 3A, so I think this was an afterthought slide. Basically, same thing. So if I can get you a Windows 10 desktop now as an IT guy, you can start playing around with it, right? So if you had a virtual desktop coming to you, you could do that. And also for certain testers, for certain users, you want to get that desktop out to them. You want to start saying, well, how does this feel? How they're going to use it, that kind of thing. So what it allows you to do is start planning with virtual desktop, because now they can get on from their iPad, their Chromebook, their Surface, their home, their their PC they're sitting at the office at. They can do all those things. So it gives them the chance to start touching and feeling and playing with it. So it gives you a little bit of benefit there, the taste. So, and then IT obviously needs it because they need to start, they got to support it. So they need the familiarity. They need to start playing around with it more. And you want to start trying out those applications and integrations and different things. So Citrix Receiver on Windows 10, this is just a little bit more about, so again, Receiver is the base little plugin. It's a little app that you load on whether your laptop or your iPad or whatever it might be, your Chrome, your device, right? So in this specific case, we're talking about the X1, which was, again, I've only been with Citrix 3 months. So I'd heard that was supposed to be a name change, and now it's in slides, so apparently that's the name we're going with. So Receiver X1 is the newest and latest and greatest receiver that's going out there. And then you'll also see there's the receiver for the Windows, and you see that receiver for HTML5. And HTML5 was mentioned before in another context, and you're going to see a lot more of that. But basically, that's clientless. I don't have to load anything on that to access my Citrix products in this particular case with the receiver access. So it's all web-based. So if I pick up that Chromebook right now that's fresh and new, or that Surface Book, through the HTML5 receiverless, I can actually get onto all my apps and desktops as I would normally. And then there's classic receiver, and you'll see that you're going to see more and more of it all be that one X1 as time goes on. It'll be that one interface, that one access point in. So on the one for Windows, yeah, full HDX capability. So what we're talking about here is high intense graphics, CAD. If you have the right back end, with NVIDIA, you could even do CAD features or whatever. But it's full HDX, it's full audio video. It's a great experience, and that's really what you're seeing come out more and more. The Zen desktops and apps, the virtualized applications and desktops is making that user experience, making that as good as it is possible to be sitting at your desktop to have virtually as well. So that the graphics AV is a very, very big deal, and there's been a lot of great enhancements recently. The user login, smart card, proximity card, those are your, I don't know if anyone uses Imprivata. I came from the hospital, so they're big in the hospitals, but they're a tap-in proximity card or that kind of thing. So they're more integration. You see the Fast Connect API. I'm going to preload my logins, or I'm going to do a lot of things to make, again, that user experience, to make that better, to take away those long login times or anything like that. So the NetScale and CloudBridge integration, that might be a little bit to a different crowd, but it integrates fully into that if you have those products. And these are into the networking side of things, the wide area network side of things. CloudBridge is great for bundling and together a bunch of your connections to different sites and making sure you always have the best route available, that kind of thing. So there's some really cool products or features in the product. Here's just an example of it showing if I load the receiver and I have these Zen app applications being pushed to you, it's just integrated right into the start menu. So again, the user doesn't feel the difference, doesn't see the difference. You're trying to make it as easy as possible for them. Oh, there we go. One more click, Citrix. So, all right. So again, back to the receiver for HTML5. This is clientless. So you're not going to get everything you get with a full client installation, but you're going to get what 80–90% of your users need most of the time. So if you don't want to have to bother supporting and installing a local piece, this just makes an easy way for them to get to what they were trying to get to most of their applications. So you see there, it's browser-based, it's clientless, and those are huge. You can still do your audio video. You're going to find that that's being rendered back on the server end instead of taking advantage of anything on the client. But it's a great feature, great option. And especially in a mobile world, it's very, very helpful. Just a URL to go to, authenticate, and gone. And the last part on that one I missed was the easy maintenance, and for most of the people in the room, that's a big deal. So again, you see the Windows notifications, you see the integration that's basically going on here. See Citrix receiver notifications here. So it's again that seamless feel, that seamless look that we're trying to emphasize. So here we're talking about Windows 10, and these would be virtual desktops you can launch from any device, whether It'll be 7, 8, the Penguin, of course, Linux, or Windows 10, and you can launch anything, do anything from it. So you can give that same experience. Once again, if the user's used to Windows 10 or 7, you're providing that, and then when you're ready to flip them over to 10, you're gonna force them to launch that one instead, or their local PC is ready to go. That way, local image. So basically, try receiver on Windows 10 today. So it's available. It's out there. And again, I got to emphasize, I did not make this slide deck up. I was handed to it, so I'm going to speak to it as best as I can. But the words in here, basically, the speaker notes are cloudnasium. What presentation wouldn't be right without saying something about the cloud? So basically, what you're getting here is, in the end, you have your Citrix management servers, whatever's running Citrix, and then whether that be on-prem, your applications, your SQL, your database, whatever, whether that be on-prem or in the cloud or both, it's supported, it works, and there's some great features to it. It is actually very good. I'm just not sure if it belongs in this presentation or not. But the delivery controller is going to connect you to wherever you go. So if you're going to be an Azure user, it works seamlessly. It'll go to there, it'll go to your on-prem, it'll go to both hybrid places, combinations thereof, and it doesn't lock you in. It doesn't lock you into a cloud provider, doesn't log you in to on-premise or not. So
2 things on that slide. Number 1, it must be because we're at a Microsoft office that the Amazon
is blacked out. No,
blacked out.
I think somebody took a highlighter or marker afterwards, and yeah.
But the Citrix platform is open that way. How many of you guys are familiar with Azure or doing anything with Azure today? So if you're not, or if you are, because it's constantly changing, we're doing a webinar tomorrow at 1 o'clock called "What is Azure and Why Should I Care?" So it'll be an hour-long webinar. And one of the things we'll touch on, not spend a lot of time on, is VDI in the cloud, which is a use case for Azure. So if any of you are interested, you probably received an email invite, and you'll get a confirming email from us after today's event that'll have a link to that webinar.
And yeah, I know we've all been hearing about cloud for years. It's really, I don't know if it's really been ramped up now. I mean, it's matured to the point. There's a lot of great tools from various companies. I mean, it's there, and I'm curious. So I know Azure exposure for me at my last job was from the ELA. They gave us so much Azure, so I don't know if that's on a renewal. No, you guys just have to know on your own. Yep. So you're going to see a lot more of that. I've got walking into customers now talking. You've got CIO, CTO saying, I don't want to be planning our next data center. I don't want to be planning current infrastructure use. They want to start making this move and starting that. So you're going to see a lot more of that coming up, a lot more cloud coming up. And it'll actually happen this time as opposed to the last 4 or 5 years. So another point to make, and Office 365 is great, and it works very, very well. There might be some power users where you're going to want that local access. So the Access product, I believe Visio is the other product. I should probably look at this up. Where you're not going to get that from Office 365, and maybe there's some macros in the Excel that you're running that you can't keep hosted up there. Certain little one-offs. And one of those things to remember is that's a great case for when you could virtually deliver your own copy of Excel Office, and you get with Office 365, you get, I believe it's 5 local installs with it. So you have this product already if you're an Office 365 user, which if you aren't, you probably will be. That's definitely where it's going. But there's going to be those power users, those one-off cases, or a subset. Maybe it's only 10% of users, but you need an answer to deliver that app to them. And it could be locally installed, but your other option is you can virtually deliver it through that app, the virtual application, with your macros customized. It'll be similar to what they experience with the cloud, but it's going to be hosted on your hardware, wherever that might be.
And with big apps like Visio or AutoCAD or something like that, no issues with performance?
No, and again, that's there's been so much work, and HDX is the what used to always hear ICA in Citrix terminology, right? The protocol, and it's amazing what they're putting in there. And there's the differences now. There's a recent acquisition that was put in called FrameHawk, and that just saw its first introduction into Citrix, and that was a product. And if you ever get to see a demo of that, and I wish I, again, probably doesn't belong here, you're talking about latency of interference that on cell phones that when you can't hear each other talking, that's performing at a rate. And it's just really amazing what they do. If you're going to do CAD and the high-end video like that, there is certain infrastructures like NVIDIA graphic cards that you want on the back end, for that kind of thing. Most of the time, it's a very specialized case. Even without that, as long as you have the memory and the power to do it on the host, yeah, it's phenomenal what it can do now. So, and most of it's protocol related. So, all right. So apparently our next steps are to download. No, yeah. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions.
Well, that's where we're heading. So if I can ask the speakers to come up in a moment, and we'll do Q&A, but just with a quick wrap up. And kind of summarizing our call to action. And if you can also complete your evaluations, we'll do the drawing real quick, and I think we will get you out on time. So we work as an extended team, QTS, SoftwareOne, New Horizons, obviously bringing Citrix and Microsoft solutions into the mix of what we do. QTS focuses on the deployment of technology, and as we deploy, we use in most of our services a common framework, which is the Microsoft Solutions Framework, or MSF. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with MSF or MOF, the Microsoft Operations Framework. MOF is kind of Microsoft's, I guess, version of ITIL, documentation around operational process management of a system once it's deployed, whereas MSF is a methodology or framework for how to go about deploying. And what we do is we'll start any project with envisioning. What is the vision of the project? What are the objectives? What are we trying to accomplish, and what's the high-level design and plan? Then drill down into the details. What are the group policy settings going to be? Can we put everything on one image? Do we want to use BitLocker encryption? What deployment tools are we using? Planning all that out at a detail level. And that then gives us a framework for going ahead with the actual implementation. These first two steps fall under what we call quick design, which is our methodology for design and planning. And the vast majority of the time when we work with customers that have enterprise agreements, similar to the training vouchers that Jake mentioned, a lot of our customers have planning services vouchers from their enterprise agreements that they can use to get these services from us at no out-of-pocket cost. Microsoft pays us to do the planning and design work. Once we have, and if you don't have the vouchers, we can still do it for you, but once we have the plan, we then proceed with building the infrastructure out according to the plan. And so that's the developing or build phase. Now, sometimes it makes sense to just deploy a technology where it's maybe a pilot or a proof of concept, and you want to get the technology stood up with a fairly standardized deployment. That's a good case for what we call quick starts, which are our package service engagements to help you stand up and get operational quickly with the deployment toolkit for a Windows 10 image, or with SCCM in a standard deployment setting, or Windows or Microsoft Intune, or Azure AD Premium, or a lot of other different technologies that we have quick starts for. Then after the solution is built, you proceed through testing and stabilization. What we found with Windows deployments is the magic number is usually 3 waves of maybe anywhere from 12 to 30 computers each. If you build and really test the image, and then you roll it out to a pilot group, you assess feedback, you check out compatibility, you make sure everything's working well, you tune the image, your package, your task sequences, and then you roll out to another group and you take in feedback and you refine and tune. Usually by the third, we're verifying we're good to go, then it's off to the races. Then you can roll out en masse because you've perfected your process. And that's what we did with Russell Reynolds. And that's the deploying phase. And frankly, a lot of customers don't need us at that point because they can do that with internal resources or 1099s, but we can do this as a turnkey methodology with our customers, and that's what we call Quick Deploy, where we take you through the whole process with project management. We're using our and Microsoft's methodology. So this gives you an idea in terms of the way to approach the project, and we bring a lot of institutional knowledge, having done this since Windows 95. You know, a lot of the technology changes, but a lot of the process learnings are similar. So for today, next steps, number one, meet with us and our partners. Let's talk about your environment. Let's talk about your plans and figure out a roadmap. How can we help you for where you're looking to go? That's, you know, no cost involved with that. That's consulting. That's free. And it's a way for us to get to know you and you get to know us and get comfortable. Number two, if you have planning services vouchers, you can use them with QTS to get free services. Try us out. Get comfortable with our engineers that, like Bill, you know, have that senior level of expertise and can give really good advice and guidance. If you have training vouchers, use them with Jake and the New Horizons team to get your staff trained up, either technically or for your users as part of a project. If you want to just get a pilot or proof of concept stood up, we have those quick start engagements. If anybody wants to move forward with a quick start within 30 days of today's event, we'll offer you a 10% discount just to make it easy to get started with us. Or a full project, let's meet and plan and spec it out. That's where the quick starts are kind of easy to get started. They're kind of quick starts. Jake mentioned the customer immersion experience, or CIE. This is really big with Microsoft. If you're a corporate account, a couple hundred users or more, we can talk with you working with New Horizons and SoftwareOne about hosting a CIE event where we bring the latest Microsoft technologies to your users. There's a structure and there's a framework to how we do these things. But if you're interested, I find the best use case for a CIE is where you as an IT leader are trying to get business buy-in to the value of the latest Microsoft technologies from leaders within the business side of your organization. And that's the good use case for that. I mentioned the SCCM webinar we did with Cyerson. That's recorded, and I'm pretty sure you'll get a link to that on the email you get later today or tomorrow from Peggy. And we do have our Azure webinar tomorrow. What is Azure and why should I care? And I hope you will choose to join us for that. And I hope you found today's event beneficial and good information. So with that, I'd like to call all the speakers up, and we'll do a kind of a final Q&A and wrap up. And if we don't have any questions from the audience, I will have a question to start us off and get us rolling.
Just remember your Red Sox territory now.
All right. Any questions? All right, I'll get us going. So Microsoft made a bunch of announcements a couple weeks ago around the new Surface Pro and the Surface Book and HoloLens and a couple of other technologies. What did each of you find most interesting or significant about those announcements? Bill, start with you.
Start with me.
Always start with you.
The whole announcement of Windows 10 in general, one of the things that I found really fascinating was Windows 10, the Internet of Things. And one of Neil's earlier slides, there was a little board up there on the right-hand side, left-hand side. And the idea is that Windows 10 goes across all of those platforms. I have a friend of mine who is a software developer for a company that makes control systems for utilities like electrical and water companies. And they basically develop the software that controls these remote devices. And I showed him the Raspberry device, and the fact that he can then use Windows 10 and develop around that on that type of platform, I thought was pretty interesting. It's still Windows 10.
Yeah, I think a lot of opportunity for creativity there.
Yes.
Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Microsoft guy. I got a Surface Pro 3 at home. I got an Xbox in my living room, so you know, all this stuff is extremely interesting to me. And one of the things I always find compelling is the blurring of the lines between business and consumer. And your experience at home with these products is the same at work, and that line is being blurred more and more every day. And it's an exciting time.
Bill, any thoughts?
For me, a lot of it is when you take a look, if you have existing enterprise agreements, most people do not understand the breadth of what they actually own all these new announcements are playing into a lot of technology you may already own and you're not even aware of it, especially when we talk System Center with the new devices. If you have an enterprise agreement now, you own System Center components that it basically becomes a utilization standpoint. It is not I have to go out and buy new licenses. It's I can utilize what I already own. And especially if you've got a wide range of third-party products that you have doing certain functions, you may already own all of it as part of the stack that's within there. So.
Paul? On the IoT of things, I remember seeing a stat, I believe it's 2017, IoT devices, which are your non-laptop phone and PC type internet connected devices, are going to surpass the typical laptops and so that IoT is very, very near as far as you see so many companies out there from Microsoft to Google to Citrix, everyone acquired. It's going to be very interesting. That has nothing to do with what I was going to talk about, but the IoT reminded me of that. And then the Windows 10, how easy it is to deploy. Again, your users are going to have a familiarity with it very, very quickly. So as a corporate entity, you need to know how to support it. Your applications, you need to know how to deal with it. So just be very aware. You're going to, as easy as they made that upgrade, you're going to just see it that much faster out there, and you'll have to deal with it.
And I'll caveat on that the consumer deployment approach is different from the business deployment approach. The business deployment approach to maintain supportability really needs consistency, and that comes from the imaging. And going to the Internet of Things comment, we're at a turning point strategically where there's so much opportunity to innovate and do great things with technology, but we need to get out from under the burden of supporting all the stuff we have. And that's where it becomes really important to do these things the right way, in such a way that you don't get bogged down just with upgrade cycles, but rather you do those upgrade cycles and that technology maintenance as efficiently and effectively as possible to free up resources to be more strategic, because otherwise you become at a competitive disadvantage.
It's also from a strategy perspective where you're going to have people where you're going to combine the corporate and the consumer, where you're going to have an executive or someone who has their own tablet, they have the Citrix receiver on it, and you now need to support it. And how are you going to support that and manage that within your infrastructure? And it's just getting more and more blurred between the two.
And I'll add the thing that I was the most excited about from those announcements was HoloLens, because I think that's further out, but I think that's got the potential to really be transformative in terms of the way we interact with technology, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for creativity for developers.
Can I add, so one of your examples on the HoloLens was the the modeling, 3D modeling, and I can certainly see it coming as requests, but in like the financial vertical we're in, do you have any specific examples of how that could be used in, again, either a legal financial vertical? I'm just trying to think of a use case for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one potential use case is even video conferencing. Just changing the way we do video conferencing instead of looking at a screen, being able to see people virtually. Okay. That's a pure productivity play. So, I mean, that's just off the top of my head, but
there's an event in New York where they were talking about it specifically with financial. A lot of it where you will see is because of your support of PCI requirements, where you have your, if you're doing any sort of credit card or however you're handling third-party retail. They anticipate retail having a very large component in terms of people are going to shop and look at that, and that's where Microsoft and Apple are investing so much in the retail space again, because they anticipate this having a major function of the see, smell, touch, whatever with that. But from a financial perspective, being able to attach charges and billing within the applications that are there that will have some sort of indirect impact back to you in terms of you're going to be required to know what the different pieces are and how that's secure and what from that is being pulled your infrastructure for however, you know.
So Bill, this isn't your space as much, but if you think about retail specifically, some of our retail customers are now re-envisioning the retail experience. You know, what should our store look like to accommodate customers that walk in with iPhones and that want to look up information about products as they shop? And HoloLens creates the opportunity for the next generation of that. You know, I look at a suit and I see information about the suit that I'm going to buy, you know, or think about buying. Where is it from? What's the material? You know, et cetera. So, you know, it's, again, an opportunity for creativity if you have the time and can make the time to be creative. Other questions? Otherwise, I got one wrap-up question for the group. Okay. If you were to leave the group with one piece of advice relative to rolling out Windows 10 across an organization, what would it be? Mr. Bill?
So I'm going to start with a statement saying I don't believe there's any reason why everyone should not be going to Windows 10 at this point. It's really a unifying platform. And in doing so, the piece of advice I have is plan. Plan first. You know, it's the old measure twice, cut once. But I would ask that everybody who's running an older version of Windows, this time next year, if we got together in this room, you're on Windows 10. I think that's an achievable goal and a necessary goal.
Especially when you think about the security ramifications of standing pat versus upgrading. Jake?
Yeah, I would say do not underestimate the ability of your user base to derail your project. Just one quick story. I did a Windows 7 and Office 2010 rollout for a very large law firm in Manhattan, and it was very clear to us by the decision makers that this would be white glove service. You know, make sure you take care of the managing partners, the associates, the councils. These are your primary targets. Make sure they're happy. So we went, you know, leaps and bounds. We served wine in some of the trainings. And we thought it was going well. Then we started hearing some rumblings and some negative feedback coming from some of the higher up partners and the legal secretaries. Probably 30 or 40, 60 to 80-year-old women weren't getting the attention they needed. And it was obviously a major issue. We got everything fixed. Everyone was happy. It was a very large project, a successful project. But it was just one demographic we didn't take into consideration the way we should based on the specifications. So just make sure everybody's taken care of and they have everything they need because they'll let you hear about it.
Which kind of goes back to the planning point that Bill mentioned, is understanding the demographics of your target audience and making sure that you've accounted not only for their technology needs, but their training needs. And being an attorney by training and working a lot with law firms, I can definitely relate to Jake's story. Bill?
Mine is mostly with what I do for a living day in, day out is you need to have a long-term, you need to incorporate the licensing as part of it. You have an investment now, you need to do an analysis of what you have now and build out your 12, 18, 36-month strategy because the licensing that's available now was not available before. And there's going to be significant financial impact if you do not lay that out as part of the process and build that in so that when your renewals are coming up, your true-ups, your step-ups, if you do some of this stuff mid-term without planning on how you're going to handle it with your device-based licensing now, you could be at serious compliance risk because of the device counts shooting up, and that's how you're licensed now, because that's all there was before. So just doing an overall risk assessment of what's there and planning out so that you know as you roll this out or as you plan to roll it out, you're doing it in the most cost-effective way. Because if you do it blindly with Microsoft, you're going to pay more than you should.
And again, that's the importance of a good advisor in that space. But I'll say the corollary to that, and something very positive, with the licensing changes recently, the inclusion of MDOP into the Windows software assurance, you may have tools that you didn't know you had, like application virtualization with AppV, like user state virtualization with UEV, like the BitLocker encryption administration module that can be tied to SCCM to manage your BitLocker encryption from within SCCM. All really great tools that we've helped customers take advantage of And many of those times, the customers didn't even know they had access to the tools. So
A lot of like what we do with QTS is we will spend 2 hours with you in front of a whiteboard, no presentation. It's just entirely a, here's what you own, let us know where you are. We look at it from a risk assessment from my end, from a compliance, but then QTS does it from a technology perspective, and it's a starting point for figuring out where you want to go.
Paul?
More of the same. Be prepared. I mean, that's what everyone's saying up here. You have to. There's a lot to know, whether it be training the users, whether it be planning out the applications, how they're going to be upgraded, how you're going to deploy it out. I mean, there's just so much, and more projects will go wrong because of a lack of good planning or communication of that plan or whatever it might be. So get the planning done and get the buy-in. Get the buy-in from the higher ups.
And I'll wrap up by agreeing that planning is really the key to success on this type of project, but getting very specific, I'll say understanding your software inventory and your hardware inventory so that you can make the right decisions and understand the scope of the project. Projects with a lot of apps are much more complicated, and you also have to have a good plan and understanding of what you want to do with your hardware.
One more, this is probably for Bill because he's helped us with SCCM before. So on that planning front, we took about 2 years to get our Windows 7 deployment out, but we got the process down. Application compatibility was not as much of an issue, and already what we're doing with testing, we're not seeing as much of an issue with Windows 10. Given how simple the upgrade path seems to be for Windows 10 compared to previous OSs, do you think that the planning is, let's say, easier than previous migrations or previous upgrades? And if so, is there a sort of a scale or sort of an estimate in company size that you see a huge reduction in time compared to previous upgrades?
I don't know if the planning is easier, because planning is planning. You still have to address applications,
right?
Device types. So there's still that planning, but I think what you're going to find is more compatibility with applications. You now also have new tools. The upgrade task sequence is key. Provisioning is key. So that you're going to take what you've already learned and move that forward. So, but you have more of an arsenal. Microsoft quotes 98% compatibility. If it runs on Windows 7, it should run on Windows 10. That doesn't necessarily include web apps, but that's where things like AppDNA and the Microsoft Toolkit comes in handy. But so I don't know if you're not really reducing planning necessarily, but you have more of an arsenal to address, and it should be a smoother transition.
I think you can shortcut through some of the steps, especially if you have the same people doing the planning that know the environment, know the answers already. On the flip side, there's new material, there's new group policies, there's new capabilities in the products that you have to decide what you want to do with. Do you want to take advantage of? Maybe you did very light group policy last time and you want to do more thorough, more lockdown group policy this time. Maybe your application profile has changed. But I agree with Bill. I think the knowledge of the environment from previous cycles will help you to be more efficient this time and maybe help accelerate the process somewhat. But it's still important to have a plan for this deployment.
It should not take 2 years.
Well, you're doing a global scale and you have a lot of unique considerations. So,
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, we'll do the drawing. If everyone has their surveys, I'll make Jake pick the winner so that if anybody is not a winner, they can blame him and not me.
I don't know anyone in the room.
Jake from State Farm.